All right, we've been getting questions about trust accounting and people wanting to know what are some best practices when it comes down to managing the trust accounting for their law firm. So here's a couple of things. The first thing I would say is if you don't already have a separate trust account, like a separate bank account, separate from your operating account, you need to do that immediately. That is something that I've seen a lot of firms just trying to manage it all within their operating account. And I'm telling you, that is probably a nightmare situation, especially when it is time to reconcile or if you ever get asked for an audit, like that's just going to be a nightmare. So the first thing is make sure you have a separate bank account for your trust account. And then what you want to do is you want to make sure that every dollar that goes in or out of your trust account, exactly who that is related to, like what client, what case is that related to? Because a lot of times what I often find is that firms are doing their, whether it's their trust pools or they're making deposits, they're not really checking and they don't really have a way of really identifying like what client is this deposit related to. You want to make sure that you know who every dollar belongs to, because if you can't answer that question, then you're really probably not in compliance with your state bar's rules around trust accounting. Also, one of the things that I think would be very helpful is working with a bookkeeper who can actually track this in the accounting system. So a common thing that we usually do for all of our law firm clients is every dollar that goes in and out of their trust account is going to show up in the accounting system. So what we usually do is in the accounting system, we itemize every transaction down to the client level. Because if we itemize it down to the client level, what it will do is it will make it a lot easier for us to be able to compare what happened there in the accounting system to what actually happened in your law practice management system. Now, you may be doing a lot of this on a spreadsheet, or you may have a lot of this, hopefully you have it somewhere, whether it's written down or in a spreadsheet. Maybe once you get to a certain level of volume where your spreadsheet method isn't the cleanest, maybe it's time to look at actually doing this in a law practice management type of ledger, like some type of software system that actually allows you to track the transactions that are happening and the client and the matter that it is related to. Because what I do find is a lot of firms who have been doing it only by a spreadsheet, what tends to happen is someone misses a few transactions and they don't update the spreadsheet, and you go a couple of months and now no one really remembers what happened to that transaction. So if you got a ton of transactions, maybe it's time to look at a law practice management system. But I do think a overall kind of really helpful process is the bookkeeper that you are working with is make sure that they understand how to do a three-way trust reconciliation or at least a two-way trust reconciliation where they can compare the activity that happened in the bank account to what you expected to happen with the trust account. Meaning, if you have a spreadsheet where you're listing, hey, we wrote a check for this client and we sent out a payment for this on this client's behalf to this vendor, you should see the same thing happening in the bank account. And the bookkeeper is there to reconcile that. Now, I've seen a lot of law firms working with a bookkeeper because they got a really good deal. And a lot of times, when you get a really good deal on the bookkeeping service for a law firm, what that often means is that that bookkeeper doesn't have experience working with law firms. And the reason why you got a good deal is because they didn't know how much work it was going to take to actually do the bookkeeping for your law firm. So you want to make sure that you're vetting that and asking, do you have experience doing bookkeeping for a law firm? How do you actually approach, or how do you do three-way trust reconciliations? If they don't have a good answer, that's probably not the right bookkeeper for you to work with. So just to recap, some best practices. Have a separate bank account for your trust account. The second thing is make sure you can actually tie every transaction back to a specific client or matter. And then number three is you want to make sure that you have a reconciliation process in place. Typically, that is going to be done by your bookkeeper, where your bookkeeper is going to look at what transactions happen in the bank account and then compare that to either your manual spreadsheet that you use, or they're going to compare it to your law practice management system. So they should be able to see whatever happened in one system should also be in the other system, so you have that matching process. And if you ever find any discrepancies or some differences, what you definitely should do is address it as soon as possible, because based on your state bar rules, that is really what you should be doing. Is you should be rectifying any variances as soon as possible. So those are my tips on helping you have best practices around trust accounting. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Law Firm and Finance Show, where we give you great content that helps you build a more successful law firm. So make sure you hit that subscribe button on all platforms and follow us for more content.